Hello, everybody. Today I'm going to talk about how to construct our outlines. And you can follow along in page 9 of your packet, and most of that should sync up. And it's really important that you have a good set of notes before moving on to the outline stage. And ideally, I would have already looked at your notes and given you some feedback and everything to fix them up if necessary. But really just make sure that everything is cited. You followed all of the requirements that I gave you, and also that we italicize all titles of our novels and also all of the titles in any of our works cited. And in our works cited too, it would be a good idea to go through and delete all the really long URLs that you copied and pasted out of the databases after .com. So it probably says like www.gale.com. You want to delete everything after that. Otherwise, your works cited page will just never look right because you're going to have a 50-character long URL, which you're not going to be able to indent. So make sure that everything is in good shape before moving on to the outline. And you also want to make sure that everything is right in your MLA heading, that we're going from one document to the next, and we might as well make sure everything is good right now, rather than worrying about it right before the paper is due. You also want to double check your citations. And if it's from the novel and it's a direct quote, that's when you should have a page number. But I know you can't see here because of this thing, but the period comes after the parentheses. There's no period here. There's a space in between the quotation marks and the parenthesis. And if it's a paraphrase, remember that we still cite it with the author's name in parentheses. And all of your research needs to be cited this way before you move it anywhere. I mean, these were requirements in the notes. We should have the author's name in parentheses for any of the electronic sources that you got in the databases, and the page number for direct quotes from your novels. And so you go into your notes document and go to File, make a copy, and rename it. And we want to make sure we're making a copy, that we're not just renaming the existing document. And you call this one Research Outline Your Last Name. And this will allow us to work in this document freely. And if you accidentally delete something or whatever, you can always go back to your notes document to find it. And so the overall process, okay, this is going to be a little bit confusing, it just is by nature, is basically that we're starting with our notes here on the left. And of course, we have for each note a bibliography, which you created for your two primary sources. Your bibliography is what will go on your works cited. And then we should have several notes about each book that we took from the text. Your source C, of course, was your first critical source. And we have source D, source E, source F at the very minimum because you need to have 4 of these. And what you're going to do is all of your bib sources, you're going to move down to the end of your outline that you're going to create. And that's just going to become your works cited. And so assuming that you use all of those sources and you don't add any new ones, that'll be pretty much done at this point in the process, rather than waiting to do it like the night before the paper's due. Then the notes that you took, you have to decide where they belong and which premise you're going to put them into. And so essentially, you're moving everything to where it belongs, and you might have something that's left out, and you would just delete it. You can always go find it again in your notes if you need it. But if you look at the way that I moved everything here, again, I apologize that this thing's here, but it's just the other bib sources. And so up here, we have the introduction. And this note that I had for E2, which was from a critic, it was really general. So I thought it was best just to put it up there as my hook to the paper because it was like basically what I was trying to say. Then, of course, your thesis and premises. And your premise 1, you're going to make into a complete sentence at this point. And your A is going to be a complete sentence referring to your first novel and how it fits premise 1. And then you put underneath it any notes that work to prove that novel 1 should fit under premise 1. And so what you're going to try to do is to pair up primary information from sources A and B with secondary information from sources C, D, E. And I have a sample on the website and actually in your packet that you can look at to see how I did it with Gatsby and the made up Fabulous Freddy. And then for my second novel, D1 from a critic, I have tied to B2 from the book itself. And basically everything that's here fits under the umbrella of premise 1. Then premise 2, same thing. Now you notice with novel 1 for premise 2, all that I have is a note from the novel. Same thing with novel 2. I just have notes from the novel. So this whole premise is lacking criticism. So either I need to find at least a little bit of it somewhere by looking at new articles, going back through the articles that you have, or we'll probably have to scrap it because it's so unbalanced. Going on to premise 3, this one's in pretty good shape in terms of having something from a primary source, the novel, and a critic that goes along with it, that these two notes work together. And then this one, I need to find information from the book, which shouldn't be hard because I only have something from a critic. And then the restated thesis. So that's basically what we're going to be going through here. But I mentioned how you're going to compile your Works Cited page. And remember when you do this, once again, to italicize the titles of the books themselves or the magazines themselves. We also want to alphabetize it with whatever the first letter is in the entry, unless, of course, it's A, an, or the. You skip it and you go to, in this case, M. And we would alphabetize them all. And then you're going to indent the second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever line of each entry. That's just MLA format. It's really hard to do it in Docs, though. So you might have to have me help you. If you can't get that to work at this point, then that's okay. We have time to fix it before the papers actually do it. Remember how an outline works, that the Roman numerals are the most general. So we're talking like your thesis statement or your introduction or your restated thesis and even your premises. They're very general. And then any of the A's are going to prove Roman numeral 1. B is going to prove Roman numeral 1. It basically all works upwards. Then our numbers 1 and 2 work to prove A. And our small a works to prove our number 1. And so basically the logic is that A and B here are true. Therefore, 2 is true. And the same thing works here. And since 1 and 2 are true, A is true. And since A and B are true, Roman numeral 1, your thesis is true. That's basically the way we're putting this outline together. And so, as I mentioned, you want to come up with some ideas for your introduction. These might be notes that you already have, or maybe you can just think of a quote, find a quote, something interesting to grab your reader's attention. And so for this one, I have from Albert Einstein, it has become appallingly obvious that our technology has exceeded our humanity. And this is for an introduction with Margaret Atwood novel and Kurt Vonnegut novel. And this is just my attention grabber. The only reason that this isn't cited here is because Albert Einstein's up here. And then, of course, I need to add that to my Works Cited page. You can't just start being irresponsible with your research at this point. If you find something, even on the public internet, like at Brainy Quote or something like that, you need to immediately put it on your Works Cited page and make sure that you cite it as well with where you use it in the paper. Then formulate topic sentences with really emphatic transitions, because these topic sentences are going to be pages apart. And so my example of an emphatic emphasis transition is, in addition to both novels explaining how the destruction of humanity began, that was my first premise, they also explore the idea of what life is like today and what the future holds for humanity. Then your A is going to be about how that premise works in your first novel. And so I know it seems like a double statement, first the premise and then the premise as it pertains to the novel, but it's the only way that we can construct the paper and make sure that in every premise we're talking about both novels. Then your one underneath your A, in this case, it's from a critic, Buisson. And then that's backed up with an actual quote in the novel that I introduced here to give a little bit of contextual information. These two together work in tandem to prove that in Oryx and Crake, the world today is ridiculed. That she's ridiculing our current society by giving exaggerations in the book. Okay. And so once again, when I say in tandem, I mean like together. So skydiving, for instance, the first time you go, at least in Pennsylvania, it has to be in tandem with somebody who knows what they're doing and has jumped hundreds of times, an instructor. And so you want to do that with your information. You want your secondary information to work in tandem with your primary information to prove your point. It doesn't matter if your number one here is secondary or primary. If you want to start off with the critic and back it up with the book, that's fine. Or you can do it the opposite way. Start with the book and back it up with the critic. And so once you arrange everything, delete anything that you don't think you're going to use. However, keep in mind that you still need to have 4 secondary sources in your final draft. So if something isn't working at all, you need to go out and do a little bit more research. Okay? And so remember, what we're doing is we're taking the notes and basically deciding where everything would fit, oops, went too far, in the outline. And anything that simply doesn't work, you get rid of. This doesn't mean you're completely done with the research. You might be if you got all the right stuff. But you can now, you know where the articles are. You can go back to them. And so here, if I need, or excuse me, let's say up here, if I need some critical information to back up this premise, I'll be able to add that in. But that's basically what we're doing with the outline. And so on Monday, this is due, and you'll share this with me. And of course, make sure that everything has parenthetical citations before you move anything. We want to make sure that we put transitions in our outline and that we have complete sentences for all of our premises. At this point, we can give it a title. We can make it better later. And we want to also work on introducing all of our quotes. Or leave a reminder at the very least to introduce it when you get to your actual draft. And if you have any gaps in your argument, leave yourself notes about it. Like, I need to find more information here or something like that. Final thing is to make sure everything's your own work and to be aware that if you go to our outlining page on the research, under the research tab on our website, this whole presentation is here. Plus, I have in your packet a sample outline that you need to look at. I didn't put it here because it's in the packet. And so make sure that you go there. I also have a link here to EasyBib if you need to cite any other sources for like quotes, like memorable quotes or something like that. And if you have any kinds of questions with MLA format, a really good website to use is Purdue's Online Writing Lab, and a link to that as well. So I know all that's very confusing. I'm going to teach the lesson in class, but this is only if you were going to miss it. And so please feel free to don't text me, to email me with any questions, and do your best with it in organizing your paper. Thanks for listening.